voice of Ryo Hazuki, everybody, right now. Joining the school, I was a guest here last year, but this year he couldn't do it. He's out in LA doing an event for the Dreamcast as well today. Why don't you tell him about it? What are you doing for it?
Yeah, so we are over at a place called Game Realms, and they are doing a 20th anniversary of the Dreamcast, and of course they invited me over. We're all friends over there, and we're having a little bit of a Shingo panel going on. And it's really great. If you guys don't know, or if you guys ever make it over to the LA area, Game Realms is a great place where they have all kinds of retro gaming, from all kinds of systems, and it's just everything that you can possibly think of. It's actually a really great place. And they do, they even have, where vendors can go in and sell their own products as well. That, just huge get-togethers all the time. It's actually a really great place, so I recommend that people look up Game Realms online. And please, if you ever make it to LA, if we can coordinate it where I can show up and we'll make it some sort of a Nintendo Jam or something like that.
Anybody got any questions for Corey? I don't think they were expecting you.
Yes, I can answer all questions except for the ending of Shingo Group.
They're no use to us. Anybody? All right, go for it.
Was there a particular line that you had to say like so many times to get the tape right that it just like was burned into your memory?
Did you get the question?
Yeah, did you repeat the question?
He just wants to know if there's any lines you had to say so many times that it's still burned into your brain.
Oh man, well you know what? I mean the thing is that for Shingo 1, Shingo 2, it's funny, it always goes back to sailors for some reason. Everybody's just talking about sailors. It's just one of those lines that I just can't escape from. But you know what? It's just, we all know it's quirky, it's funny, and it's part of the reason why we all love Shingo anyway. It's just one of those like, people are funny sailors around here. So every time I really do a line or something like that, it's always about the sailors. So yeah, that's just kind of one of those funny iconic lines that always tends to stick around. But with the thing is, Shingo 3, yes, of course, Ryo is still looking for his revenge and he get from places. So yes, it will be all new lines that you guys can hammer into my brain as much as you want. But it's funny, Bill Black, the voiceover director for Shingo 3, he makes fun of me. He brought up a Thomas guy for, if anybody doesn't know, it's like the definitive map of LA or all the LA streets, like technically it's the Thomas guy. But anyway, he bought the 1984 Thomas guy for me, and this brings it up on the screen. It's like, here, not asking for directions. Look it up yourself.
Anybody else got a question for him? Go for it.
I guess what was the most difficult line?
What was the most difficult line?
Between Shingo 1 and 2.
Between 1 and 2, is there like any particular line that was just like really difficult to do?
Difficult to do. It just depends on how well my brain is functioning that day, because sometimes my brain doesn't make my mouth move properly, and sometimes it can just be something really easy, and it just ends up being one of those things that we have to say 10 times in a row, and then okay, maybe forget about it, and then come back to it or whatever. But what's funny is that it was actually a very opening scene of Shingo 1 where I'm supposed to be, screaming out the word no at the very end of anybody who hasn't seen Shingo, of course. I don't think it's much of a spoiler because it's the very first movie, but anyway, Hazuki's father dies and he goes, no, at the very end, very classic line, right? But I think he needed my voice to be slightly higher. So if you can imagine trying to scream out no in a fit of passion, but just make your voice a little bit higher, that's when silliness starts to happen. Like my voice broke that thing 3 or 4 times before we got that line.
So I think we'll let you go here in a second, but could you give us a couple of Ryo quotes just so everybody gets nostalgic and draw here?
Oh, gee, well, how about some suggestions from the audience? What
Anybody got a suggestion?
Sailors!
How many Game Boy? Always expected to say.
Black cars.
Yeah, can you say black metal is way horrible?
Okay, sure. Don't you know that black metal is way cool?
One more. Anybody?
How about a game of Lucky Hit?
How about a game of Lucky Hit?
Oh, yeah, okay. Hey, I want to give a lucky hit.
There you go. Everybody keep that Corey for It'll be awesome. Good luck today, man. I'll talk to you later. So that was my little bid for the show. So who wants to talk about something? What do you got?
All right, let's
You
try
take
to
over.
figure out a topic right here. So, what were some of the biggest surprises for the Dreamcast that we had? Like something that I was like, whoa, this is something you cannot get on any other console. I love that this is defining the Dreamcast, basically. Like one or two.
Yeah, we're just gonna go right
We're
back.
just gonna go right to this.
So
You know, it was
outside
on
of
Xbox as well.
let's try this from another angle.
Okay.
List some of your favorite games.
Some of my
All of us. I realize you said you have 3. So just
Tech Romancer. I love Tech Romancer.
We're
It's
not
so
talking about that much.
good. I just Tech Romancer is great. For some reason, I was big on Slave Zero. For a while.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Slave Zero was fun, and let me see. I'm trying to think of one more that really, I guess Hydro Thunder, really, right?
Yeah, Midway was surprisingly supportive, and they made a lot of good stuff.
They were surprisingly supportive. They had either great ports of it, or just their games were just solid throughout. There was very little you could say bad about games. They played well, they looked good, and even if they were mediocre, it's still, it's better to say than some other consoles where they could have absolute garbage. So.
Yeah, the Dreamcast was unique because most consoles fail because they suck. But the Dreamcast failed because it ran out of money. That's a big difference. For those who don't know, the history on that, Sega at that point was hemorrhaging cash because they had flopped with multiple consoles, and the Dreamcast was mostly funded by one Japanese eccentric millionaire. Do you remember his name by chance?
Isao Okawa.
There you go. So he was mostly funding the console out of pocket. So even though it was great, there just weren't enough people buying it to offset that. He dies, and then a week later, Sega Japan discontinues the console. So it's the console literally died with him, and he was the only thing keeping it afloat financially. And then that's why I think, in my opinion, if you guys can debate this, but I think that's why the Dreamcast has so much nostalgia now, because everybody just remembers it being good and then stopping. Nobody remembers it as this garbage, I played the Jaguar, but it's terrible. So everybody remembers it as being terrible. Thoughts?
I don't think it's garbage.
It is not.
Are we evolving and going into a Jaguar panel now?
No, I don't want to come with it. There's so many disappointments.
More about because a lot of consoles now, they sell them at a loss and make money on the software. Is that how the Dreamcast was, do you know?
I know they cheaped out on a lot of components, like the laser.
Most infamously, it's the GD-ROM that they cheaped out because they went too strong with the Saturn lens, and that was really expensive. So that was one of the areas that they and that to this day is a problem. You want to explain a possible solution to that?
Yeah, sure. So,
We have a Dreamcast.
any of you guys here into console modding? Yeah. So, are you guys familiar with what we call an ODE, optical disc emulator? So, with the Dreamcast,
Do you know what an EverDrive is?
Yeah.
Okay.
So just to kind of finish this thought there, and this console is a kind of an example. With the Dreamcast drive failing, there was 2 people. There was the guy that made the GD, I forget his name, and then you had Nemo or MNemo that made the USB GD-ROM. And what it is pretty much an adapter that removes the disk drive, right? and you can plug like a USB or an SD card in and load games directly into the system.
Oh, cool.
So that's a fix for that. So yeah, I modded this one like, what, 3 years ago, I think?
Yeah, so if you find a Dreamcast that doesn't have a functional lens, hang on to it, because you can replace that with a different type of board, but suddenly you're up and running with games, and they actually typically run faster.
Yep, and you can also run oversized CDIs, like for instance, somebody made in English, so people took the Xbox audio for Shenmue 2 and made an English audio port for the Dreamcast with Xbox quality audio, but the problem is it's so big for CDs that you have to have it burn into a GD-ROM, which is pretty much very hard to do nowadays because of very scarce resources for that. Or you can get one of these and just pop it on a USB stick, it's no problem. So you get some pretty cool stuff out of these.
But going back,
We have mics.
Going back to your question, another thing that might factor into it was, I know for a fact that the launch price was very reasonable. The Dreamcast was $200. Even today, that's a great price. You know, and even, you know, I think Sega really wanted to just take every bit of mistakes that they learned from the Saturn, like namely the infamous E3 $299, $399 like scandal with Sony that launched the PS1. That, you know, it wouldn't surprise me if they took a loss on it. Like at that cost for that, you know,
It was
powerful
about
system.
getting the consoles in the homes.
Yeah.
And then if there's enough in the homes, people will buy the console. That was the logic. And they went hard. With that opening, the launch, man, it was like so many amazing games that just hit right away. Soul Calibur, Sonic Adventure, I think Power Stone 1.
Yeah, I think so.
Like Hydro Thunder, a bunch, like there was so many.
They had a solid opening line.
Yeah, and then unfortunately, it slowed down a lot because they basically spent all that time and all those resources just getting those games out at first. And even though I'm not the biggest fan of Peter Moore, he made a good point about this recently. He was the president of Sega at the time, and he basically said, like, what we probably should have done was hold on to some of those and roll them out throughout the year, and then you probably would have had better success. Because in Japan, when the console first came out, it kind of flopped, because they only had like shovelware to launch it with. It came out almost a full year before it came out in North America. So that full year, they just spent all that time finishing up games so they would have solid releases ready to go. And I think that's like the one time I would agree with Peter Moore, is they maybe should have rolled those out a little bit later.
In Japan, didn't they also,
I think in Japan, they also try to market it as like a business machine for like conference calls and things like that.
Yeah, there's a bunch of weird stuff like that, because they had the modem and then they could communicate, but because of that, there was also some weird stuff. I've done videos on this, but there's this thing called the Divers 2000 Dreamcast. Anybody heard of this thing? So, okay, it's like 3 people. It's a giant television that looks like a chow or something. Like it's a big blue, like you know, like those old IMAX. You remember those things?
Oh, yeah.
It looks like one of those, and it's just a television, but it has a Dreamcast built into the top of it. And I've done some research into this, and it has a modem built into it. And it was supposed to be like a physical edition of Skype. The idea was that everybody's going to buy multiples of these and have them throughout their house, but then they only made 200 of them. So it's like, Sega was full of crazy ideas that just never went anywhere. But then they were ahead of their time, you know, networking, online play, all that stuff.
Once you definitely token of goodwill, just like starting right out the gate, it's like, basically, we're apologizing for a lot of the stuff that we kind of did over the years between all the attachments, the add-ons, going everywhere from the 32X to the Sega CD, everything. They got to the point where I think we're just going to condense everything down, have it ready for you. A little bit, good foresight, good future-proofing, which ultimately didn't really go too far, but it was really, you know, they included.
Yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head about that. You said you got felt burned by Sega. Can you talk more about that? Because,
Yeah.
like, I didn't have that perspective, because I was ignorant.
So, yeah, so I was, you know, the Sega Genesis was my first, like, personal video game console. You know, I got it, you know, fairly early, and I really fell in love with the Sega and, you know, their IPs and their properties and everything. And soon after that, I also got into Sega CD, because my mom worked as a executive at JVC at the time, and she got me a JVC XI, which was really cool, I'd say. But it's like, yeah, it has a built-in Sega CD, so I got a lot of, like, I got burned by all those really shitty FMV games, and like all those, you know, just poor quality ports and things. And then pretty soon after that, the Saturn's coming out, and I'm like, oh, well, I gotta get a Saturn. I had a Saturn for maybe like 6 months before I got like all just kind of crappy games, a lot of like launch games, like the Nerf version of the Virtua Fighter and the racing game, and it was just like, there was no Sonic game. I'm like, what the hell? So I sold it, got an N64, and I'm like, so, I felt like, okay, well, I had the Sega CD, and they released nothing for that, and I got this Sega Saturn, and they released nothing for that, and then when the Dreamcast came, I'm like, no, not again. You're not going to fool me again. And I did as a kid. When even though some of my friends had the Dreamcast, I thought it was stupid. I'm like, oh well, PlayStation 1 looks just as good as that. And, the N64 could do games better than that.
But then back when you have the bias that was
yeah, oh yeah.
You have it like in your mind. It's like whatever you're throwing at me, I'm not going to like it.
And then in the early 2000s, when they were liquidating this stuff, and I was working in retail at the time, I laughed. I was like, Sega screwed up again, that's what happens. I'm sure glad I didn't jump on that sinking ship. I got off, to the greener pastures of Nintendo. And, but it wasn't until like later, it's like, that I discovered, but like, yeah, I felt burned. I can only imagine if I got into 32X or something, I would have been miserable.
And that's kind of a shame too, because you gotta think, anybody that's ever bought a console, when you start off with that console, that's like your first impression moving forward with it, and anybody, other outside of collectors, especially when you're kids, you're only getting a fraction of the entire library for that console. So if you start off with either parents that don't know any better, or grandparents give us a gift, and they give you those cheap $5, $10, $20 games to start with, that's going to really sour your opinion of the console right off the get-go. And now Dreamcast can have, every single game is like an A+ perfect game in the world, but it was even worse so when you had Sega CD, which is mostly FMVs, and those got really cheap very fast. But they had solid games on it. 32X had a few solid games on it, but still.
But it was around for what, a year and a half before it just opened.
So I mean, that's sadly what I've seen in some people. It's like, I hate this console. Why? Because the games are awful. And then I show them decent games for it. It's like, wow, completely missed out on this. They were expensive. And then I start getting into like, what was your family like when you were growing up? It's like, poor. It's like, yeah, I understand.
So we kind of topic shifted all over the place, but
Yeah.
you were kind of going with, what was your favorite games?
So I already said some of my favorites. James, what are your favorites? Yeah, I want to know.
Oh boy, I guess it's pretty predictable. You probably already know what I'm gonna say, do you? So, I actually love Zombie Revenge. The announcer for that game is so ridiculous. It's like, there's no time, like when you're playing it. But I guess the Dreamcast is a hard one to really pinpoint down like a favorite game, right? Because you have different experiences with different games and whatnot. Like, I remember playing House of the Dead 2 with like my cousin, right? And she moved far away, so like I had fond memories playing that game with somebody who I miss every day. Or like you have Shenmue, which is like kind of, a very defining game for me. Or you have Sonic Adventure, which was like the first game on this system that I loved, So it's kind of hard to really pinpoint down favorite games, but if I had to choose some that I have like a really big attachment to, so I would group Shenmue 1 and 2 together as its own thing, as like number one, and that's for every system, that's not just the Dreamcast. And my two other games I tend to gravitate towards are Jet Set Radio, and believe it or not, actually Dave Mirra Freestyle BMX. I absolutely love that game. Like, it's such a random game, but yeah, I mean, Shenmue, I could talk for hours. I'm not gonna really get into that, but like Dave Mirra was fun after school, and then Jet Grind Radio, or as it should be called, Jet Set Radio. There was just something about the aesthetic of that game, plus the music and just how it played. It was so like stylistic that it just kind of blew your mind at the time. And even until today, you go back to it, it actually aged pretty well, in my opinion. Anyway, yes, those are my favorites.
Obviously mine's kind of predictable. It's Shenmue. I'm friends with the voice actor. But so Shenmue 1 and 2 is always my go-to, but I always tell people Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, Power Stone 1 and 2, Crazy Taxi 1 and 2, Soul Calibur 1, Jet Grind Radio, and then there's like the oddballs like imports and stuff. We can maybe get into that later, but if you're just looking to get into the Dreamcast, those are always kind of the safe bet starting places.
Yeah, I find it that getting into the Dreamcast as an adult, kind of after the fact, and being able to look at its back catalog, it's like, yeah, of course I love games like Soul Calibur, and even sports games. Like a lot of those are really great, 2K games. But I love quirky, weird games, and the Dreamcast is full of them. Got one right here, Space Channel. And it's like the game is an acid trip, man. It's so weird. I love it. But like weird ones like Typing of the Dead. I mean, my God. You mentioned House of the Dead. I love Typing of the Dead.
Me and that guy back there actually did a Typing of the Dead cosplay like a couple years back. It's pretty legit.
And then one that's, it's kind of a joke now, but was really revolutionary back in the day, was Seaman. Because, I remember, I remember hearing stuff that it's like, oh, it's just kind of like this weird Hey You Pikachu kind of thing, where you're like talking with this mutant fish, and Leonard Nimoy's in it somehow. But,
He does the narration.
But the ability of that game to learn and adapt its gameplay and its interactivity with you just based on asking questions and things like that was revolutionary. There was really no other game at that time that was doing stuff like that. And like nowadays you have stuff like Siri and Cortana and Ask Google and stuff. But it's like, this was almost like a weird, forefather of like this text-to-speech computer AI software. That's really, really interesting.
And he would say some funny things to you.
Yeah, he would like insult you, he would throw shade and stuff. It's really
So anybody got any questions about Dreamcast? Anything you want us to talk about?
I just want to say, I don't know, I really like Hey You Pikachu. I think that was a superior game.
it had the Pokemon IPs.
Well, first of all, you're wrong. No, I love Hey You Pikachu too, and that was.
I was being completely sarcastic.
I like Hey You Pikachu. I had probably had more fun with that as a kid, than I did Seaman, but still, it's pretty cool.
So I've heard about like the new way to get online with the Dreamcast. Can you talk more about that? Like the best way? Is it really like a real option? And do people actually play it? It's like I try to play Fantasy Star Online with people.
So you're talking about the device that kind of combines a Raspberry Pi, so you kind of mimic a broadband modem? From what I understand right now, that's the best way to go because people are building like user boards that kind of work with that software. Especially since actual broadband modems are just ridiculously expensive. But from I think it's called Dreamcast. Is that the name of it? I could be wrong on that. Correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, as of right now, like that's like pretty much the method that people are using in the modern day to get the Dreamcast online.
What I do know about that, as far as like are people actually playing it, is we should have mentioned them earlier. Video Games New York donated some stuff that they would be giving away to you guys. But they actually host online tournaments for the Dreamcast. So they schedule them from time to time. And there's a minor celebrity who's in this, Rory Culkin, as in Macaulay Culkin's brother, is one of the people you will find is in that group from time to time. So, exactly. Who's cooler, right? Yeah, I'm gonna wet the bed. Like that's, yeah.
that was Kieran.
Is it? Okay, see, I'm glad we have a Culkin expert. Go for it.
What was the first online game on the Dreamcast? Was it Fantasy Star or?
I think it was that web browser.
Thank you for calling. Phantasy Star was definitely the biggest one. I don't know what technically had online support, because some had it in like really weird ways, like maximum pool, you could submit your scores and things like that. Sonic Adventure actually had online components. It had actually DLC, free DLC, which is still, that's the weird thing, is a lot of those games now, the servers are like fan-made and are backed up. So like you said, you can play some of them, and other ones like you have oddities, like you can reacquire the DLC for free for Sonic Adventure and all these other games. Something like, there was a game called Planet Green that only came out in Europe. It's a coaster without a server, but now the servers are back up and you can play that again. So to answer your question, I'm not entirely certain which one. I guess you would count Sonic Adventure because it was technically the first game before the console. That probably not the answer you wanted, but
Dreamcast, like, how did they get away
Thank you.
with that?
I wanted to talk about that. All right, so you just wanted to talk about like the history of it, or what?
How did they get away with it? Like,
Well, they did. They don't tell. So, for those who don't know, there was this company called Gleam that specialized in PlayStation emulation for the PC. And at one point, they decided they wanted to work on the Dreamcast. And the idea was, we'll make this disc that you can buy, put it in your Dreamcast, take it out, and you can put PS1 games in it. Not only will it play the PS1 games, it will actually function better than it would on a PlayStation 1. Ultimately, what came of that is they did 3 separate releases, one for Tekken 3, one for Metal Gear Solid, and one for Gran Turismo 2. And it put Sony to shame, because if you were to run them on a Dreamcast, it was obviously better. Like, it was a much cleaner picture, it was very, very nice. But ultimately, Sony kept suing them over stuff, but they kept losing, because technically they didn't break any rules. They just didn't have the funding to keep fighting Sony's lawyers. And eventually they had to settle out of court, and that's why they don't exist anymore. But if you can, there are true oddities for the Dreamcast if you can ever get them. Technically, Sega was supposed to sue them, but they never did because they thought that they were going to be great. But they also used what's known as, is anybody here familiar with the nil CD exploit for the Dreamcast? All right. So basically the Dreamcast could read 3 different formats. One was the normal GD-ROM type of discs. The other was music CDs. And then the third one was this thing called nil CD, which was basically music CDs with an extra line of data in it. And it was intended for basically karaoke discs in Japan. Yeah, something like that. What do you got there?
I think this is a no CD, right?
No, this is a GD-ROM.
That's how much I know.
This would be an
This is
example
a
of
disc.
CD, right? Yeah. But basically, so like I said, they were enhanced discs that just had extra lines of data so that people could, you know, if you took the right type of music CD, you put it in the Dreamcast, it would have extra visualizations or something like that. Hackers eventually figured out you can reformat those to become these, and then you can play games through it. So that was how the whole piracy thing came about with the Dreamcast. But at the same time, that exploit allowed independent developers and publishers to make games for the Dreamcast. Even now, 20 years later, they still get new games for the console. And Dreamcast was done through that. They used that exploit because they didn't have Sega's permission, even though Sega never tried to stop it.
They had like Beats of Rage, I think that was.
Well, that was, so that's different. That's what you're talking about is the homebrew scene. The homebrew scene was just people like James who like to just tinker and just make stuff that you can like burn on a CD and you make yourself. And then there's the independent scene where guys will get together and they will make a game, they'll send it to a factory, press it on a disc, they give it nice artwork, and then they get it sold at retail. Like I said, Video Games New York actually sells new games made for the Dreamcast in 2020.
Man, one last thing about the Gleam games that were released. I've seen some side-by-side comparisons, and the quality at which those games run on the Dreamcast is astounding. I've seen side-by-side with those games running on the PS3, and the Dreamcast looks better. It's like remarkable. Yeah.
The guys that programmed Dreamcast was genius.
Yeah. Rand Linden is the guy's name, primary engineer. He was unbelievable.
And he did that program within a couple of months, too. He was fast what he did, he was very efficient, and he was better than most emulators out there now that have been developed over the course of 15, almost.
Yeah, that dude was way ahead of the curve.
Yeah. Just to add one more thing to the Dreamcast as well, if you guys are ever interested in checking it out. A couple years ago, or maybe a while ago, I don't remember, there was a release team that actually leaked the beta of Dreamcast, which is a general emulator that'll load any PlayStation game. So it's not as good, I believe, as
It's like 35% done.
Yeah,
It's buggy, very buggy.
Okay, don't try it then, never mind.
No, definitely try it. It's just, don't get your hopes up. It's not like this perfect way to play PlayStation games. It will attempt to load anything. Most games will crash, and then a lot of stuff, some stuff will work great, but a lot of stuff won't. And it's just, you kind of have to play it knowing it's an unfinished emulator.
Yeah, and
but
like,
some games look amazing.
yeah,
Like
Mortal Kombat Trilogy looks really good.
You know what's incredible on there is Silent Hill 1.
Really?
Silent Hill 1, if you play with the Dreamcast beta, the nighttime scenes are like insane. Like they just look absolutely astonishing. And you can try the daytime stuff, which is kind of an interesting system because it creates this white box around all characters. So you can see it as like a radar system where you can see like enemies way in the distance.
Yeah, the hitboxes show on Trilogy as well.
Yeah, and sometimes there's like funny glitches. Like in that game, all the dialogue was said, and as soon as the character's dialogue is over, a random piece of dialogue for that character, some other part of the game is said real quick. It's like, I have to find my dog, Harry! You know, and just, so sometimes it can be really funny. So the Silent Hill, like it's, like I said, not finished, but it's one to check out.
So, sorry to say there's a Dreamcast beta drinking game to a shot every time I saw no glitches.
You're dead within a few minutes.
Can I say something? Okay, so, I was disappointed that Castlevania Resurrection got canceled, because it's the only other game that stars Sonya Belmont, and damn you Konami for ignoring the existence of Legends, because I love that game.
Here, here.
Rest in peace, Seven
Koji hates Legends.
I heard before that the beta of that does exist in someone's collection.
Of which game?
The Castlevania Resurrection.
And by someone, he means he has.
No, I'm fine. Trust me, it would be out.
Did they just get freaked out that it's like the first Belmont cannot be a girl?
It got canceled because the Dreamcast got canceled.
Wait, wasn't that big on
No.
The game's done.
Oh.
A lot of Dreamcast
We gotta
games
use it.
did ultimately get made, but that's never been one.
We're gonna be playing.
You go ahead. Anybody?
I just got a copy of Crony Hawk, first page or two up there. Any of you have any opinions on that?
I think Tony Hawk 2X on the Xbox is a better port, but Tony Hawk 2 I think is the definitive skating game on the Dreamcast. Aside from Jet Set Radio, but I mean skateboarding.
Yeah, I mean, there's a place where everybody can be happy. I'm not gonna sing along. I was like, for a second, I blanked on the song. You know which one I'm talking about. I wonder who sings it. There's no place better, everyone can be happy. It's supposed to be a place in the whole world. Yeah, there we go. That's it. Who's on playing for all time? It was Buddy.
Well, it's on the Tony Hawk First Game 2 best video game soundtrack ever.
What's your favorite song in it?
I think the first one that I put Jerry's a race car road.
Yeah.
Let's see, Justin?
Alright, so this has been bugging me for a very long time with the Dreamcast. So one of my favorite games breaks from Bang 9, and to this day, no one has found a way to get that to happen in VGA. Does anybody know like why that is?
It runs at 240.
So there's no, because like even the exploits don't work on it. There's no weird graphical issues.
Under traditional methods, no. I actually ran into the same problem using one of those Dreamcast, like HDMI modded Dreamcast. Apparently, with one of the newer firmwares that's unstable, there is an option to force it. I couldn't personally get it to work, but the guy who made the board commented on my video and said, you can totally do it, but I never got that to work. But that's the only potential solution I've heard of.
Can you emulate it into VGA? Like if you're running
But his question is running it on actual hardware.
Running on hardware, and every single solution that's ever come out has not been able to get it to run.
Yeah.
It's still like one of those big mysteries.
So, for those who don't know, the Dreamcast, almost all of its games run through VGA, which is basically the equivalency of high def at the time, and that's how people want to tap into them. Very few games don't support it. What he's talking about is one specifically that doesn't, although there's been attempts to get it. It's one of the better games that doesn't support it.
It's like really low percentage too. It's like maybe 1-2%.
It is. There's about 800 games on the console worldwide, and there's 50 that you straight up just can't. Whatever you do, you can't get it to run.
You just have to put it on the old series.
No, you can run them on an HDTV. It's just you have to like start or this video or something like that.
Yeah.
What's the absolute most obscure game that you do enjoy on a regular basis?
Oh, I thought you were going to say that. Well, I have a full Dreamcast set. Everything. North American, European, Japanese, independent. It's done. We're thinking of platform. Thanks. You're a hoarder. You have a problem. Now the rarest one I have is this Japanese exclusive called Growing no Torikago Capital 6. Say that 6 times. It's in Japan. Sega did this weird series that was like an online, I don't know, like a horror like movie.
Yeah.
So there was 6 games in the set. They're not really games; they're basically like interactive video. The first one was sold at retail, and after that, they were all sold through Sega Direct, which was kind of their version of like Club Nintendo. And the last one, only like 200 copies were ever released. So it's like by far the hardest one to get. In fact, I went to Sega Fest in Tokyo like last year, and they had like a full like there's their Dreamcast like memorial thing, whatever. They didn't even have a copy. So it's a very uncommon game, but it's unplayable. Because not only is it just a Japanese like series of videos with no English in it, they're all completely online dependent to servers that have not existed in 20 years. So they're basically coasters, very expensive, rare coasters. But as for something I play regularly, I don't know, I'm not still on.
Or at least something you enjoy.
I think mine has to be watered down. No one ever talks about that game, but I love it. It's a horizontal shooter, and I'm trying to think like what vein it would be in. It's not really so much of an R type of sorts, because
it's a shoot 'em up. It's a very generic way to put it.
Yeah, think of it as like a Ikaruga, but just like turn it onto its side, and you have different branching paths depending on how well you do, and a point-based system, and man, I just love that game so much. It's fast and furious, and you get so many bullets just flying all over the place. It's a little bit of strategy involved too.
I think I'm gonna go with this Japanese game called Bomber Hee. Like you're laughing. It's a really weird name, but basically it's like a building demolition game. So you find like a skyscraper and you're supposed to just plant bombs until you blow it up and get it completely flattened. And it's surprisingly addictive and totally
It's like a wrecking crew kind of thing.
Kind of, yeah. It's really good, and no one ever talked about it. It's just such a weird thing.
What was the name of the shoot 'em up?
Or down.
A couple of my favorite. I do like a lot of the homebrews and you know the independent Dreamcast games that have been released. One of them that I really enjoyed is a side scroller called Alice and Mom's Rescue, which I actually got at Video Game Speaker.
No, I'm in.
So that's a really cool indie Dreamcast game. In terms of officially released, I don't know if it was the last one, but I feel like it was the last Dreamcast game ever released, like licensed by Sega. I think it's called Karos. It's a really good shoot 'em up, released in Japan only. I don't even have a disc copy of it. I've only emulated it, and I really want to get a copy of it because it's a really great shoot 'em up, which the Dreamcast has a ton of.
Yeah.
That makes me feel better. It's also the last game ever licensed by Sega on a Sega console. Little stat is true. So we're gonna go into like some power round question time because we have to spend the last 10 minutes doing questions to you guys, and you guys can win stuff. So go for it. Anyone? Go for it. Nice controller.
Just got today.
Congratulations.
Okay, I think the only topic I have is one of the most infamous canceled games from the Dreamcast.
Shadow 2 North America?
Yeah, although that's debatable.
Okay, fine, seconds. Half-Life
3, no.
Half-Life
GTA 3.
Half-Life 3.
GTA 3 was the one time set to the Dreamcast.
Half-Life 3 pass, that's what I was getting at.
Oh. That would have been like 10th on my list. It's like, yeah, there's that. I think in GTA 3, I think at one point Halo was actually supposed to be exclusive. Propeller Arena, yeah, that one, because that one was done.
Yep.
That one, you can actually play that. That leaves like shortly after.
What about that Dreamcast game that was made for the dev kit with better hardware, the flying shooting game? It actually overheats your Dreamcast if you play it.
Geist Force.
Yes.
That did ultimately come out.
Oh, it did?
No, it like, that's a really weird release because the guy who got a hold of the code worked with some Russian dude and they got it all like operated.
Oh, cool.
Then they did a physical pressed set of them. They sold like 50 copies ever. He was actually, I think, based here.
Do you have Jersey?
I have 3.
Of course you do.
Dude, nobody was buying them, and I was like, I feel bad.
You have a 5th. Oh my god.
I must. I have something to send it to her. But yeah, no. Geist Force, really strange release. It was basically Sega's attempt at a Star Fox game, but then ultimately it got canceled because, as he points out, they realized that actual Dreamcast hardware couldn't really run it. So this Russian dude figured out how to like, tone it down to get it to run stable, but as stable as an unfinished game could be.
And then you could also save the Dreamcast games that eventually come out on the Xbox. Like I think Just Radio Future was originally a Dreamcast game. Toe General 3. Toe General 3 was also, that was recently released.
There was Gun Valkyrie, Shinobi,
Sega GT.
Yeah. The 2002. Yeah. There was that.
Was Sonic Heroes in development?
It probably was at some point. Super Monkey Ball was. I just think it's insane to think that if Sega, what's his name,
Isao Okawa.
Yeah, that dude had somehow held up, I don't know, another year. You could have seen a world where GTA 3 and Halo both ended up as exclusives on that console.
Yeah.
Imagine that world.
So you really have nothing to say on Half-Life?
Oh, right, we were talking about that.
It loads too much on the Dreamcast.
Yeah, it was unfinished, but I do wonder, like, what that game was so close to coming out that they released official strategy guides. Like, I have one. The Prima strategy guide for specifically the Dreamcast version was sold in stores. Like, they were that sure it was about to come out. I've never tried it on something like the USB device or the GDMU, but I do wonder how much better the load times would be.
So it loads a lot, but each loading is only like 10 seconds. I mean, you're running USB 2.0 with these things, so it does load a little slower than it probably could, but it's pretty good.
There you go.
Were there any like special edition or rare Dreamcast consoles? And if so, give me
Yes, like I said, that Diver 2000 has got to be the ultimate like weird thing.
Don't talk to Adam about the Resident Evil.
Why would you bring that up?
He said to me, he saw my red controller, he's like, is that a Resident Evil controller? And I was like, don't say that in front of Adam.
Alright, I'm getting the 5-minute one. I thought we had 10. Okay, alright, so I'll power through the story. I found a Resident Evil Claire Edition Dreamcast in Japan. Full, complete, cheap, bought it. Went through customs a couple of times, never thought to look through my luggage. TSA at one point opened it, took the controller out, never put the controller back in the box. So I didn't know about it, and I had no idea what part of the world it happened in. So
I missed out on that Platinum Dreamcast. Remember that? Yeah, that you said. It was like a very expensive Dreamcast being sold at a very wrong price, and I went there too late, sadly.
So since we got the warning, we got to do this. We're going to do this thing called Gag Bag, which is just plastic bag. Now, it's basically, I've got a whole bunch of stuff up here that you guys can win, but you won't know what you won until the end. Some of the stuff is good, like Sega donated a copy of Sonic Mania Plus for Xbox One. Video Games New York donated 4 new Dreamcast games. Then you can win a bar of soap. Like, you don't know what you're winning. The way we're going to do this is we've got 20 prizes. There's going to be 20 questions. However, 2 of them are very special, so they're going to be isolated. So what we're going to do is I'm going to say, raise your hands, and then who wants to be in charge of this? Determine who raises their hands first. You'll do it. Okay, Rob's going to be on top of this. And so if you raise your hand first, you'll get a question. If you get the question right, you'll give me a number, and then later you'll get your prize.
Through 21, right?
Through 18. You can pick 1 through 18.
1 through 18.
Okay? All right. Do you guys understand? Want to play? Okay. All right. Go.
Make sure.
Okay. First question for you. Are you ready? Are you ready for your question?
Great.
Okay, good. You won. What's your number? 1 through 18.
13.
Okay. Remember your number. This is the level of difficulty, by the way.
Okay, hands down. 3, 2, 1.
Okay. Oh, by the way, I want to thank both Robs and James for being up here before we go. So your question is, what are Rob and James' names? There you go. Good one.
What's your also accepted James and Rob?
Yeah, that would be 1 through 18 cannot be 13. 15. Okay. Again, remember your number.
3, 2, 1. Yellow shirt. Number either 1 through 18, except for 13 and 15.
Okay, question is, we're also celebrating another anniversary today. It's the 5th year of AVGC. So again, thank all of them for hosting this. Do you think that's cool that they're 5 years old? Yeah? Okay. No one would have been except both of them.
I'm sorry? 17?
17.
11.
3, 2, 1. Glasses.
You. Yeah, you. Okay. So we're in New Jersey. What state is New Jersey? New Jersey, New Jersey. New Jersey, great.
What number?
18.
18.
These guys are knocking it out of the park.
Yeah, I know, you guys are batting hundreds.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. I saw in the back, hey, Pikachu. Oh, thanks, yeah.
All right.
What's
Right. The Dreamcast is 20 years old. How many years is that?
that? I believe might be, I could be wrong about this, 20 years.
Ah, you got it. Okay.
What's your
This
number?
guy's good, man.
I'm gonna go with 7. 7.
Okay. Again, please remember your numbers, all right?
3, 2, 1. Blue tank top.
Okay. The Sega Dreamcast was released by what company?
Oh, yeah, it's you.
Okay. The Sega
Hold on. I'm trying to remember.
We are on a
I
time.
think it might be Sega.
You got it right. What's your number?
8. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Blue shirt.
The Dreamcast came out on September 9th, 1999. What month was that? You got it?
Yes.
Okay, congratulations. What's your number?
We'll do, 7.
7 or
7 is taken.
Alright, so we'll do, 5.
Well, some people might know those, but September is actually the 9th month of the year.
Oh,
Just 999. Great.
3, 2, 1. Say blue blazer, red shirt.
Okay. Sega's traditional blue and white logo. What color is it?
Blue and white.
You got it.
And what's your number? 3. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Mike.
You got it? Okay. AVGC and Sega both have 4 letters. Does that matter? Good. Right. Yes, also would have been acceptable. Number 1.
This is what happens when you write questions at 3 in the morning.
No, the worst part is these were planned. Okay.
You've had 20 years to plan.
Right.
3, 2, 1. Lady with the Pikachu wristband.
Scrunchy.
That's scrunchy.
Oh, scrunchy. Okay.
Oh, all right. You good? You ready to get
Yeah.
All right, come on. Number?
1.
It's already
What is
taken.
it?
20.
Can't take it. 1 through 18.
Oh, sorry. 2.
2. All right. 3, 2, 1. Orange t-shirt.
Oh, hey. Is anyone up here wearing glasses? All right. You could have ignored Rob and still got that right.
Which number? 3 taken? 3 is...
3 is taken. 4 is yours.
There we go. All right. 3, 2, 1. Saw the PlayStation hat.
Okay. Sonic is Sega's mascot. Did you know that? Yes. All right. Again, if you didn't, that also would have been fun. Number?
I thought it was on the kid.
Yeah.
6.
Yeah. 6. Okay. 3, 2, 1. So, purple shirt.
Oh, yeah.
Purple shirt. Okay. Sega is based in Japan. Have you ever been there?
No.
That's fine.
Which number?
I'll take 18.
18.
18 is taken.
How about 17?
I'll take 15.
15?
15 is taken. 16 is available, as is 14. What?
14.
14 is
14.
18.
All right.
I'm curious to see everybody's. Okay.
Alright. 3, 2, 1. That was you.
Okay, at one time, Visual Concepts made games for the Dreamcast. Ultimately, Sega sold them to Take-Two, and it became the company known as 2K. Is that interesting? Yeah. All right. Again, if you weren't interested, that would have been fun. What's your number? 14 is not available. 16 is available. 16?
How many more we got?
Okay, go ahead.
3, 2, 1. Oh, pixel art.
Pixel art.
Might have jumped the gun a little bit, but.
Do you remember earlier when Corey was on the phone with us?
I do.
All right, that's good. Okay, what number do you want?
You got 9?
Say again?
You got 9?
9 is
The
your
ratio of win to lose is just insane.
I have the smartest audience ever.
All right.
You ready?
3, 2, 1. I saw Chris.
So one of the groups that donated stuff to this was Video Games New York. What state is in Video Games New York's name?
I believe no lifelines left, so New York.
You got it. And your number?
Is 6 available?
6 is not available.
8. Is 8 available?
10, 11, 12 are all available.
10.
Yeah.
All right, home stretch. 3, 2, 1. Pink shirt.
Okay. There was once a Mary Tyler Moore movie that had a Dreamcast in it. Did you ever see it?
No.
That's fine. I don't remember the name of the movie. That is true. There is a movie with her that has a Dreamcast in it.
Funny story about that. My dad's second cousin married Mary Tyler Moore.
Seems legit.
Yeah, it's weird.
There's only 2 numbers, 11 or 12.
I'll take 12.
12.
All right, last one.
Not quite, but
Oh, yeah, okay, last real one.
less fake.
Last fake one. 3, 2, 1. Black shirt.
The Dreamcast had many amazing games, and also some bad ones. Have you ever played a Dreamcast?
Yes.
Okay, no again would have been fine. But, okay, so you got by default number 11? Okay, so the last two are actually going to be real questions. Do we have any Shenmue fans in here? Okay, so you guys, this is your turn. I'm going to call this. So these are actually legitimately difficult questions because the two items are very special, and I want to make sure they go to actual Shenmue fans.
I wrote them while I was taking a shower this morning.
We will ask the question, and the first one to raise their hand with the correct answer.
Sure, but we also have a lot of questions because literally anybody can answer any of these. So the first question is, are you just going to have my second?
Yes.
Okay. What was Cool Z's original name? Nobody? What does Joy say to Rio outside the come over guest house in the Man River Cantonese? We don't know.
Did you sleep?
Is that correct?
Do you want me to say the answer?
You're a judge, decide.
I would say that's close enough.
Fine, okay. So, do you want either 19 or 20? Fine. Okay, 20 is yours. And then we have one left. Okay.
Last one.
The last thing, again, is Shenmue related.
I got one. This is it.
Shenmue has a couple of foreigners in it that fight Rio repeatedly. One is a black guy, one is a white guy that looks out like Court Marshall. What are their names? Nobody? Okay. Who owned the cat on Shenmue 1?
The cat that got ran over.
Oh, you already got one, right?
No, we didn't.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, we already.
Who owns the cat in Shenmue 1?
Which cat are we talking about? Because the question was wrote around the cat that got ran over.
Okay, yes. Yeah, Megumi.
No, Megumi owns the cat that's in the box. The cat's mother is the one that got ran over. Who owned the cat's mother?
Oh.
Anybody know that? Got one in the back.
Zombie?
No.
Nope.
This is great.
Nope, we're gonna move on.
No. The answer is the guy at the construction site that's holding the sheet. You find out by reading the strategy guide that it's implied that he owns the cat. His face is also based off of the lead one of the lead programmers were named too.
All right. Okay. Prior to being called Shenmue, the game had multiple prototype names. Name two of them.
Virtua Fighter RPG.
Another one.
And another one. There's two left.
Something to do with Kira.
The Akira subtext is the subtext of the Virtua Fighter RPG name.
Okay, we're gonna move on.
Okay, it's Project Berkeley, Virtua Fighter RPG, and the Man with the Peach Tree.
Okay, what does the name Violent Village translate to? No. Possibly if we get desperate. Okay. What consoles has Rio made some appearance on at some point? This is harder than you think.
There's quite a few of them.
What? Trying to get back in. Xbox Live.
Xbox 360.
There's a lot of them. There's one.
There's one.
Oh, you got multiple.
I need all of them.
Take a stab at it.
Take a stab at it.
I know that's my 1. The Sega Racer, Sega PS3, Dreamcast, original Xbox.
A lot.
I think we got to move on.
Halfway there. All right, come on. What is the name of the girl that Goro somehow got to marry? What high school does Rio go to? It's killing you, I can tell.
Wait, you like Suka High or something?
That is
Yes!
correct.
So by default, you're number 19. Okay, can number 1 come up here? Number 1, you won the Star Wars Ziploc bag. Sorry. Number 2, come on up.
At least it wasn't the soap.
At least the soap can get used to wash your hands.
Number 2, you want a Castlevania game sticker, Dreamcast sticker, which actually all of you can have one, and a John Briggs YouTuber sticker. Number 3, please. Number 3, I'm just sorry in advance, you won the Bonita soap. Number 4, please. You won the hand sanitizer. Number 5. That was number 4. That was 3? No, that's 4. You said 3. 5. 5. You won the Dreamcast copy of Breakers. Number 6, you won the chopsticks. Number 7. Number 7, you won Tales from the Borderlands, donated by 2K. Number 8. Number 8, I'm sorry, you won 2 bags of decaf coffee in the hotel. Number 9, you won the cream and sugar. You should hang out with the coffee. Number 10, come on up. Number 10, you won Sonic Mania, donated by Sega. Number 11, come on up. Number 11.
Number 11?
Number 11. I don't know who won number 11. All right, well,
I can be 11.
all right, number 11, come on up. This is number 11. You won 2 napkins from the flight on Spider-Man. Number 12, come on up. Number 12, you won Captain Tominic, the Sega Dreamcast. Yes. Number 13, come on up. Number 13, I'm sorry, you won the other soap. Number 14, come on up. You won Orange 7 for the Dreamcast. You won Orange 7. Number 15. Number 15. You won 2 chocolates from the hotel in it. Number 16. You won. Yes. Number 17. Come on up. Number 17. You won. I'm sorry, a classic fork and knife set. Number 18. Come on up. Number 18. You won a set of Japanese Kit Kats. They taste like strawberry parfait. Enjoy. Number 19. Come on up. That was the 2 Shenmue ones. Number 19, number 20. Number 19, you won a Shenmue 3 fan from Japan Paris Expo. Yes. Number 21, the rarest thing here, Corey Marshall's E3 badge from this year, signed by Corey Marshall himself. Thank you everybody for coming. If you like Dreamcast stickers, I'll have them at my table. They're 100% free. Come on by. Oh yeah, sure.
You guys, you gotta do a complete room here so I can everybody to see it now. If you want to